There are a lot, and I mean a lot, of different types of elves. There are high elves, there are wood elves. There are sun elves, there are moon elves. There are blood elves, there are dark elves. There are Keebler elves, and there are Christmas elves. And that's why I thought it would be a good idea to look at the race as a whole, and see what the benefits and drawbacks are for this classic staple of D&D. First off, let's start with 3.5 Dungeons & Dragons. In 3.5, your basic elf gets a +2 to dexterity, a -2 to con. They're immune to sleep effects and receive a +2 to enchantment-based magic. Elves also have low-light vision, receive a +2 to spot checks, and this is very important, they have weapon proficiency with longbows, short swords, long swords, and rapiers. And that can be very important if you're playing a class that doesn't have very good weapon proficiencies. Moving on, Pathfinder Elves. Pathfinder Elves are a bit better than 3.5 Elves, as they receive a +2 to dexterity, a +2 to intelligence, and a -2 to constitution. They as well are immune to sleep. They receive a +2 to perception, which is the Pathfinder combination of spot, search, and listen, which is really a very efficient choice for the skill. And Pathfinder Elves also receive weapon proficiencies. Finally, let's look at the Elves of 5th edition. Now they did something very interesting. They split up the elves into kind of the three classical groups. Your High Elves, your Wood Elves, and the Drow. 5th edition High Elves receive a +2 to dexterity and a +1 to intelligence. Wood Elves, +2 to dexterity, +1 to wisdom. And Drow, +2 to dexterity, +1 to charisma. Now that you have an idea of what the elves in the various editions and versions of Dungeons & Dragons are like, let's talk about the class choices that really work with the race. Now, pound for pound, I would say one of your best choices is Wizard. Elves, especially in Pathfinder, have just the right stats for it. That increase to dexterity means you're more likely to make your ranged touch attacks. That spells like Scorching Ray or Ray of Enfeeblement. And since Wizard is an intelligence-based class, that +2 to int really helps you cast higher level spells and increases the DC for the spells that you have. Other good choices, especially in Pathfinder, are the Witch class and the Alchemist class, as elves have the right stat line for both of those classes. If you're looking for something a little more martial, I think elves make excellent rogues and rangers, especially if you're doing something like a combat rogue. Although, if you're attempting that, you'll definitely want to have at least some of your good rolls in both charisma and constitution. Elf rangers, especially if you're going to be the bow-wielding ranger, i.e. Legolas. That bonus to dexterity is going to be helpful, and the bonus to intelligence, well, there's nothing really wrong with it. Although you'll probably want to have a powerful animal companion to give you a nice buffer in battle. Some more neutral elf classes, I think druids, however thematically it might make sense, don't really jive perfectly with elf stats. The dexterity bonus is good and everything, but the bonus to intelligence, it doesn't really apply to the druid. Same thing with cleric. A fighter can be anything, so elf fighter, sure, that can work. The only class where I would say the elf is at a severe disadvantage is going to be the Barbarian, as that's a constitution-based class. And elves, pretty much across the board, have their constitution impacted. Alright, finally, let's end with a little discussion of RP. And I think, like any type of RP, one thing you should always go back to is the character's origins. And with elves, kind of like how they did it in 5th edition, your three major elf factions are going to be the High Elves, the Wood Elves, and the Drow. Now, obviously, most fantasy fans are going to have seen the movie Lord of the Rings, and J.R.R. Tolkien's incredible depictions of both High Elves and Wood Elves. The High Elves would be like the Elves of Lothlorien, or Imladris, / Rivendell. That's your Elrond, Galadriel, those guys. They would be like the super powerful elf wizards who have been studying magic for centuries. The Wood Elves, obviously the definitive one, is Legolas, and any of the Mirkwood Elves. They really get the symbiotic relationship with the forest, although that is obviously present in the High Elves as well. Now, if you're looking for good food for thought when it comes to the Drow, I am actually not really a fan of any of the Drow in Dungeons & Dragons. I don't think they're that cool. I don't think they're that interesting. I don't find them truly compelling as characters or as villains. I think if you want a really interesting take on the Dark Elves, I would recommend the movie Thor 2: The Dark World. I absolutely love those Dark Elves. They're incredibly mysterious, very dangerous, very cunning. And I'll also recommend Warhammer 40k: The Dark Eldar, who I also think are a really good version of the Dark Elves. Again, they've got that enigmatic quality. And obviously, in terms of drow, I couldn't not mention the drow poster boy, Dritz de Worden, the famous drow ranger. Now that doesn't mean that when you're trying to create your elf character, you need to be all happy-clappy woodland guy, mysterious underdark dweller, or all virtuous elf wizard. There are ways to lend edge, or to soften any of those character traits. All of those things are just kind of beginning points to get you thinking about how you want to do your RP. I've also found the elves in the Elder Scrolls to be pretty interesting. They have both wood elves and high elves. And in the game Skyrim, we got kind of an interesting take on elf bad guys in the form of the Altmeri Dominion, who are these sort of elitist, repressive jerkwads. And I thought the elves in Hellboy 2: The Golden Army were also very well done. You kind of got that elitist quality, the connection to nature, but also made them very sinister and dangerous, as opposed to the Tolkien elves, which really come off as these friendly, sort of superior beings. I hope you've enjoyed this D&D race analysis from D6damage. If you're interested in analysis videos of some of the various classes in Dungeons & Dragons, or character builds, be sure and check out D6damage right here on YouTube. Thank you for watching.